All right, so we're back and ready for another deep dive.
Indeed.
This time around, though, you've given us some source material that's, let's just say, a little outside the box.
A bit unconventional, perhaps?
That's one way to put it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at Angefictor text today, and also the study guide that goes with it.
Yes, a fascinating pairing.
And the whole thing revolves around this idea of the object monologue,
Precisely.
which, as we've discovered, means basically giving a voice to your stuff, to your, inanimate objects.
Exactly. Giving them a platform to speak, shall we say.
And from what we've gathered, they have a lot to say.
More than one might expect.
And maybe not all of it's flattering to us, the owners.
Well, that seems to be a recurring theme, yes.
So our mission, as always, is to sort of sift through all this and find those nuggets of wisdom.
The gold amidst the quirky humor.
Exactly. So we're going to explore this whole technique of letting your toaster or your, whatever it is, your houseplant, maybe air all its dirty laundry.
Metaphorically speaking, of course.
Metaphorically, of course. But the goal here is to uncover some honest truths, right?
Precisely, and perhaps some humor along the way.
Potentially some hilarious, uncomfortable truths. Yeah.
It does seem to lean into the darker side of humor.
A little bit, yeah. Just a heads up.
Oh.
The tone of the source material is not exactly holding back.
No mincing words here.
So, to lay it out plain and simple, the basic idea of this object monologue is we pick an object, any object, and we give it personality.
We personify it and imagine it speaking.
Right, and not just speaking, but speaking about us.
About its owner, yes, often with a focus on the less than ideal aspects of their life.
Less than ideal being a polite way to put it.
Indeed, a generous interpretation, perhaps.
So let's jump right in with the example that really grabbed my attention, the talking toothbrush.
Yes, a classic for a reason.
You're just starting your day, you're in the bathroom, bleary-eyed, and suddenly your toothbrush is hitting you with some hard truths.
And not just any truths, it claims to be the chronicle of your downfall.
Which, when you think about it, is kind of funny.
In a darkly humorous way, yes.
But also kind of makes you think, like, what does my toothbrush actually know about me?
That's where the brilliance of this technique really shines through.
Yeah, it's specific.
Exactly. The author emphasizes using incredibly specific details, and it's those details that elevate the humor and make the self-critique so much more effective.
Like, instead of just saying, oh, you brush your teeth poorly, this toothbrush goes right for the jugular.
It calls out the Tinder dates with the heavily filtered photos.
Oh, yeah.
The questionable tax returns.
Creative accounting, as they say.
The late-night YouTube spirals fueled by cheap wine and longing for an ex.
Okay, now that's getting a little too real.
But that's the point, isn't it? It's those specific details that make it relatable and make us laugh because we recognize those less-than-stellar moments in ourselves.
So for our listeners out there, think about that when you're writing or even when you're just trying to be more self-aware.
Specificity is key.
It's the difference between a vague observation and a real gut punch.
It's the details that make it sting so good.
Which brings us to the author's rather blunt advice.
Don't write about the weather.
Or your cactus, for that matter.
A bold statement.
But honestly, pretty solid advice.
The point isn't to wax poetic about the mundane. It's to choose an object that's deeply intertwined with your life and let it unleash a critique.
With the intention of having it roast you and destroy you with love.
For a poetic punch in the face.
Now that's a phrase that sticks with you, right?
It perfectly captures the spirit of this approach.
We're not aiming for gentle introspection here, people.
This is more like a comedic ambush orchestrated by your own belongings.
And it's not just for laughs. The author argues that by giving voice to these silent observers, we can access a deeper, more honest level of self-reflection.
We bypass our own internal filters and defenses.
Because, let's be honest, our internal monologue is pretty good at sugarcoating things.
Whereas the toothbrush doesn't care about your self-image, it's just reporting the facts.
The evidence is right there in the bristles.
Precisely, and the examples get even more pointed, shall we say, as we move on.
Oh yeah, we're getting into some personal territory now.
We encounter the expired condom from 2019.
Oof, talk about a relic of the past.
The author uses it to highlight a stark contrast between a time of potential connection and the present reality of Netflix insomnia, and perhaps revisiting an ex's social media.
It's like that expired condom is a symbol of unrealized possibilities.
A silent commentary on how life doesn't always go according to plan.
And there's something darkly funny about that juxtaposition.
It's a truth that many of us can relate to.
So for our listeners, remember, a seemingly insignificant object can carry a lot of emotional weight.
And it can tell a story without even saying a word.
It's all about implication.
Precisely.
And then we have the classic, the gray underwear with the whole,
A wardrobe staple since 2020.
oh yeah, we've all been there.
But the author takes it a step further, calling it a textile symbol of your emotional collapse.
I mean, come on, that's hilarious.
It is a bit over the top.
But there's a kernel of truth there, right?
It's the mundane elevated to the metaphorical.
That hole that we just keep ignoring it becomes a visual representation of neglect.
Of things falling apart.
So the takeaway here is that even the most ordinary objects can become potent symbols.
It's all about perspective.
Exactly. Now, the question is, why does this whole absurd approach actually work?
Why do we find it so relatable, so insightful?
The author offers an explanation. Objects don't judge, they just see everything.
They're silent witnesses accumulating data without bias or agenda.
They're like uncritical mirrors reflecting our lives back to us.
Without the filter of our own self-perception or the opinions of others.
The toothbrush saw the tear-streaked face after the breakup.
The condom remained unused.
The underwear, well, it acquired another hole.
These are the facts, the undeniable truths of our existence.
So for you, our listener, consider this maybe stepping outside your own head and looking at your life through the eyes of an object can offer a fresh perspective.
A more objective assessment.
And I loved the little jab at influencers and their carefully curated online personas.
Ah, yes. A subtle reminder that things aren't always as they seem.
Especially on social media.
The toothbrush has seen the real you behind the filters and perfectly posed photos.
So for our listeners who value getting to the heart of things quickly, this approach offers a shortcut.
A way to bypass the BS and confront the truth.
Even if it's coming from your laundry basket.
Exactly. And then there's that rather unexpected comparison to Beethoven pouring cold water over his head.
Oh yeah, that one threw me for a loop.
It's a bit out there, but the point is about the link between intense creativity and confronting the less polished aspects of oneself.
The author suggests that wrestling with your own mess, your own demons, can lead to powerful artistic expression.
It's that poetic punch in the face again.
Raw honesty, even if it's a bit jarring.
And that leads us to the author's call to action.
Ditch the scented notebook, they say.
Apparently, genuine creativity doesn't smell like lavender.
And choose the object that will actually explode on stage.
Quite the dramatic image.
But it speaks to the potential impact of this writing style.
It's visceral, memorable, impact.
So for our listeners, don't be afraid to push your boundaries, to embrace the unconventional.
It's in those uncomfortable spaces that we often find the most powerful creative breakthroughs.
And for those who are intrigued, the author does mention that the book is available in English.
Always helpful.
And there's this great line, still got questions, ask your toothbrush, at least she won't lie.
Full circle back to the core concept.
Now, the study guide you shared really reinforced all of this.
It did provide a nice summary of the key takeaways.
It hammered home the idea that the object is there to reveal our flaws.
To roast us with love.
And that those examples, like the condom and the underwear, are meant to be symbolic.
To evoke a deeper meaning.
The study guide also talked about the intended emotional impact.
The laughter, the sting of truth, the moments of self-awareness.
And it emphasized those objects as truthful, non-judgmental witnesses.
And that connection between creativity and struggle.
Plus, a little more of that humorous critique of inauthenticity.
The influencer jab makes a return.
And of course, the encouragement to choose meaningful subjects for your writing.
And the promise of practical techniques within the full book.
Oh, and that final piece of advice?
Consult your household items for further understanding.
So to wrap it all up, what's the big takeaway here?
This object monologue. It's a provocative and humorous technique that challenges us to see our lives through the eyes of our stuff.
Our often neglected and overlooked possessions.
It's about embracing a level of brutal honesty, even if it's delivered with a heavy dose of sarcasm.
And within that discomfort, those uncomfortable truths, we might just find some surprising insights.
And perhaps a deeper understanding of ourselves.
So as a final thought for you, our listener, take a look around right now.
Pick an object, any object.
Your phone, your coffee mug, that pile of laundry in the corner.
And imagine if it could talk, what would it say about you?
What brutally honest truths would it reveal?
What uncomfortable realities would it highlight?
And what creative potential might lie within that very discomfort?
If this deep dive has piqued your interest in exploring your own creative voice, perhaps through the lens of your long-suffering possessions, you might want to check out the author's book, Poetry Master Poesy Craft in 7 Tagen.
Be creative, Steph.